Imagine knowing exactly how and when your world will end, but realizing that if you try to warn anyone, you will be tortured for it. When we picture biblical prophets, we usually imagine fearless, booming heroes. But when Jeremiah was called to deliver his message, he protested. He was young, inexperienced, and terrified. He actively tried to refuse the job. This map illustrates the geopolitical reality he was born into. As the long-standing Assyrian Empire fractured in the late 7th century BC, a brutal, highly militarized Babylonian empire surged outward to swallow its territories. Judah was caught directly in that path of conquest, and the divine message Jeremiah was tasked to deliver wasn't one of miraculous deliverance. He was ordered to tell his own people that their destruction was imminent and that they deserved it. To speak that truth meant giving up any hope of a normal life. To obey his calling, he had to willingly become an enemy to his friends, his family, and his country. He started at the cultural center of the nation. Standing at the gates of the temple in Jerusalem, Jeremiah told the crowds that their sacrifices were useless. He argued that their worship was a superficial performance, covering up deep moral rot. He compared their religious practices to broken cisterns, underground water storage tanks that had cracked. They had abandoned a flowing, living water source to dig their own dry pits that were entirely incapable of holding anything of value. The crowd immediately turned on him. The priests dragged him to trial for blasphemy, and men from his own hometown of Anathoth quietly organized a plot to assassinate him. By doing exactly what he was told, Jeremiah isolated himself. He lost his community, his physical safety, and any sense of social belonging among the people he was trying to save. The situation escalated from religious disputes to a literal fight for survival when King Nebuchadnezzar's Babylonian army marched on Jerusalem and blockaded the city. Inside the starving capital, Jeremiah stood in public courtyards and told the soldiers and citizens that resisting Babylon was suicide. He instructed them to drop their weapons, walk out the gates, and surrender unconditionally to the enemy. The monarchy viewed this as treason. To suppress the panic, King Jehoiakim ordered Jeremiah's recorded warnings to be confiscated, cut into pieces, and dropped into a fire. When Jeremiah continued to speak out, military officials under the next king arrested him. They beat him, dragged him to a courtyard, and lowered him by ropes into a mud-filled cistern, leaving him to sink into the mire and starve in total darkness. He offered them the only factual roadmap to physical survival, and for that exact reason, the state systematically tortured him as an enemy combatant. The physical abuse took a massive toll, but his writings reveal a much deeper psychological collapse. He fell into a severe depression, writing that he wished he had a small lodge far out in the desert so he could escape humanity entirely. He wept openly for the destruction of Judah. He loved his country, and delivering a message of inescapable doom broke his heart as much as it enraged his listeners. He tried to stay silent, but he described the divine message not as an inspiration, but as a burning fire forcibly shut up in his bones, a physical pressure that he could not hold inside, no matter how hard he tried. He was caught between his empathy for his neighbors and an absolute compulsion to speak a truth they refused to hear. He even went so far as to curse the day he was born, wishing he had never existed to carry this message. The crowds, the priests, and the kings were dangerous, but his most grueling battle was waking up every day and carrying a burden he desperately wanted to drop. In 586 BC, the Babylonian army breached the walls of Jerusalem, burned the city, and slaughtered the resistance, exactly as Jeremiah had warned. But being right offered him no relief. The few survivors who remained in the ruined land hatched a panicked plan to flee to Egypt. Jeremiah told them to stay. They ignored him again, packed their bags, and forcibly dragged the exhausted, aging prophet with them into Egyptian exile. By every standard metric of success, his life was a failure. He did not change the minds of his neighbors, he did not prevent the collapse of his government, and he died far from home, as a captive of his own people. But losing the physical temple and the political state meant the exiles had to figure out how to practice their religion without their geography. This represents the shift Jeremiah proposed. Rather than relying on a centralized system, he introduced a new covenant, where the law is written directly onto the human heart, creating a personal connection rather than a national one. He lost his reputation, his freedom, and his homeland. But by enduring those losses, he preserved the core of a faith that outlived the empire that destroyed his city. His life demonstrates that duty is rarely victorious or glamorous. It is the brutal act of holding on to the truth when it costs absolutely everything.